and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and I am on my own recording the podcast today. So Helen is away with her family this week. Unfortunately, very sadly, her father died a couple of weeks ago after quite a prolonged illness. So she's going to be spending a little bit of time with her family, and I will be holding the fort. Fortunately, we had a coaching conference in the last week, and I was presenting a session on love in the coaching room. So this episode is going to be entitled Love in the Coaching Room. And it's going to be, for those of you who were at the conference, you will get a bit of a refresher on what I was talking about. For those of you who weren't able to attend the conference, you get to see me in action, or at least hear what I was going to say. It's not quite a presentation, but I'm going to talk through what I was discussing at the conference. So, as I say, title for this session is Love in the Coaching Room. And I was with my son before the conference at the theatre. We went to see Much Ado About Nothing, the local RSC, and obviously discussing the conference whilst I was with him. And he said, "So Dad, what are you going to be talking about?" And I said, "Well, love in the coaching room." And he said, "Well, aren't there all sorts of rules about that sort of thing?" And I said, "Well, yes, but that's not what I'm actually going to be talking about. So just for clarity on the podcast, we're not going to be talking about romantic love, sexual attraction, attachment. None of those things are going to be part of this discussion. We'll leave that for another day. I'm sure there's a podcast episode in there somewhere. But for today, we're going to be talking about the Greek concept of agape, which is an all-inclusive, generous, expansive, non-possessive kind of love. The sort of love that you would have with family, with friends. And I think it exists in the coaching room. So I'm going to explore what that might look like in the coaching room in this episode. Interestingly, I've had a bit of a journey with love in the coaching room. Love isn't a word that I tend to use in my professional life. I tell Helen that I love her. I tell my children that I love them, my grandchildren. There are people in my life that I will express love for. But in terms of my business persona, love is not a word that people would generally hear me talking about. But I've been on a bit of a journey, and the journey's really been about my values. And I've always done quite a lot of work around my values, and I've narrowed it down to 6 different values. So my values were openness, connection, independence, perspective, learning, and kindness. And many people say, well, you can't have that many core values. Brené Brown is of the opinion that you can only have 2. I've heard Caroline Walker talking about only having 3 core values. But I've always argued, and many of our listeners will have heard me argue on training courses, that I have 6, and I couldn't possibly get it down to any less than 6. So I have openness, connection, independence, perspective, learning, and kindness. So those are my 6. And as I say, I've got quite attached to my 6. But I've been doing a little bit of work and listening to other people on podcasts, reading books about love in all its forms. And it got me thinking, and I was thinking about my values and which of those values fed into an overall value of love. And I think openness is definitely a value that fits into that overarching love theme. Connection, definitely. The coach Tony Robbins suggests that most people will settle for connection because they find love a bit scary. Now, I don't necessarily find love scary, but I think perhaps in a business sense, I would aim for connection rather than love, as a term that I might use. And finally, kindness. And again, that's something that I think I show up in a kind way. I expect other people that I work with to be kind to those around them. And interestingly, I was doing some work with a local NHS trust around values. It was a smaller group within the trust, but we were talking about their team values. And they decided that kindness was one of their values. And after the workshop session I'd run, one of the members of the group came up and said, "I don't think it should be kindness." I said, "Okay, let's talk about that." She said, "I think it's too fluffy a word. I don't think the wider organization would buy into kindness. I think it needs to be compassion." And compassion is a very different thing. I mean, obviously, within the medical setting, it's a very worthwhile pursuit, a value of compassion, but kindness, I think, was what they decided as a group was one of their values. And why would you not have that if that is what you've decided? But anyway, go back to my values and that value of love. So openness, connection, and kindness, I think, all feed into an overarching value of love. So now I just have 4 values: love, independence, perspective, and learning. And I'm kind of working on perspective and wondering whether I can get perspective down into that love theme. I'm not quite there with it yet, but maybe one day I'll end up with just 3. So Brené Brown will be very pleased with me that I'm heading towards 2. Maybe it's still a work in progress. We will see. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm ever going to give up independence and learning. We'll see. And interestingly, I did my VIA character strengths profile back in January of 2020, just before the coronavirus struck. And basically, with the VIA character strengths, you rank your values in order from 1 to 24. So what came out top for me was actually love. And in VIA character strengths terms, love is defined as valuing close relationships with others, in particular those in which sharing and caring are reciprocated, being close to people. And I think that's true. But interestingly, I've kind of dismissed that as a VIA character strengths profile. And I'm like, okay, love's in there, but I wouldn't have said that that was my top value. And certainly when I have come to decide on my own values without using a profile, say love wasn't part of it. But obviously there's something in the VIA character strengths that love as a value came out top for me. So I'm going to have to own that, I think. So obviously we're very lucky in that we work with doctors predominantly. And working with doctors, they all come with a sense of compassion. So the compassion is baked in. It's part of their identity as doctors that they have compassion. And we know that the doctors that are drawn to our transformational coaching diploma training have a deep sense of care as well. So they're both compassionate, but also very caring in a more general sense. And so that's really helpful. They already come with some love before they even start their training. And I think compassion is tricky because I think compassion in the coaching room can lead to that sense of rescuing. So my understanding of compassion is that it's recognizing the suffering in others and being driven to ease that suffering. Now, in the coaching room, we don't always necessarily want to ease someone's suffering. We kind of want them to ease their own suffering. And I think we're in danger of getting to that place of, within the drama triangle, being the rescuer, trying to solve the problems, making suggestions, giving advice, maybe even solving the problem for the person in front of us, which we know from a coaching perspective can be quite limiting and disempowering for the coachee. So it's not a place we particularly want to go to in the coaching room. Obviously, there may be some people that are in real struggle, need more support than just what is available in a coaching room. And it might be out of a sense of compassion that you decide that they would be better served by getting support elsewhere. So definitely compassion will feed into it, but it's not our main way forward within the coaching room. So interestingly, a few years ago, we had another conference an online conference where Caitlin Walker from the Clean Language community came along and was talking to us about clean language. And clean language is all about using metaphor in our coaching. And during the session, Caitlin Walker asked the question, coaching is like what? Obviously searching for a metaphor. And instantly when she asked that question, I was taken to my mum's kitchen table and sitting and having a chat over a cup of tea with my mum. And my mum was one of those people that other people were just drawn to come and tell their problems to. So she would quite often get friends, family arriving at her kitchen table, pouring out all their troubles, and she would listen without judgment and let them talk through their problems, and they would go away feeling replenished in some way. So that is what coaching reminded me of. So when I was asked question, coaching is like what? It was like a cup of tea and a chat with my mum. So maybe there's some genetic thrust in there for me that coaching perhaps was always where I was going to end up. Not that my mum had any coaching training, she just was that way naturally. Now, it's hard to talk about love in the coaching room without thinking of Carl Rogers. For anyone that's not come across Carl Rogers, he's worth looking up. He's the granddaddy of the person-centered approach. So very much the founder of that approach. And one of Carl Rogers' key concepts within helping conversations was the idea of unconditional positive regard. So that when you arrive with whoever it is, the individual you're going to be talking to have unconditional positive regard for them. And Carl Rogers saw this as an acceptance, a caring, and non-possessive love. So I think we can all buy into that idea as an aspiration that unconditional positive regard is a great place to start when we approach the coaching room. Now, I think it's aspirational. I don't think we're all going to uphold it. I don't think we're going to live up to it all of the time. But I think if we have it at the back of our minds that when we approach the coaching room, if we can show up with unconditional positive regard for the person in front of us, then we're going to be doing good work. Now, generally what happens is we arrive with a sense of judgment. And in judging the person in front of us, for whatever reason, and it might just be the way they look, we're strange creatures, humans. We try to make sense of the world. Often we're primed to go to that negative place of thinking just in order to protect ourselves. And psychologists would suggest that we look for the positive intent in ourselves when we take actions that perhaps aren't helpful. So we will always stop and think of our own positive intent. But when other people take actions that we disapprove of, we never stop to look for their positive intent. We just judge the actions. So we have that bias, self-serving bias, that we will know our own positive intent, but we won't look for it in other people. So obviously coming into the coaching room, it's very easy when someone tells you their story and tells you what's happened. It would be very easy for us to sit in judgment of them and to judge the story and to judge their actions and maybe think, well, that was a ridiculous thing to do. But I don't think it's particularly helpful. So I think what is helpful is to focus on their positive intent and their strengths and the positive aspects of their character. And I'm reminded of the lovely story of Great Eagle, the Cherokee elder, who'd been a warrior in his younger days, but in his dotage, he would sit around the camp. And there was one day where he was sitting watching over his grandson, who was playing in the dirt with a wooden horse. And as his grandson was playing, Great Eagle told him the story of the two powerful wolves that do battle inside us each day. And there's one wolf that's called negativity, and he's full of hate and anger and despair and loathing, envy, jealousy, shame, guilt, all sorts of negative emotions. And each day he does battle with the other great wolf that is called positivity, who is full of serenity, calm, joy, hope, compassion, kindness, and most of all, love. And each day these two great wolves do battle. And as he told his grandson this story, Great Eagle continued to watch over him. Eventually his grandson looked up from his horse and he said, "But Grandad, which wolf wins?" And Great Eagle gave him a wry smile and said, "The one that you feed." That's a lovely story, isn't it, about where we focus. And I think it's true that where we focus is where our attention goes, and that tends to be what we get. So the more that we can focus on the positive aspects of our coachee, the more we're going to draw that out of them. Whereas if we focus on the negative side of what's going on for them, then we will sit in judgment. So we can start to bring love into the coaching room by focusing on the positive. So initially showing up with that unconditional positive regard, not jumping to judgment. Another concept that Carl Rogers had was around psychological contact that's made between the coach and the coachee. And there has to be that psychological contact in order to facilitate the change. If we're not if there isn't any rapport, if there isn't any trust, or if there isn't that psychological contact between two people, then it's very unlikely that anything profound is going to happen within the coaching room. And if we have that psychological contact, then that allows us to develop empathy with our coachee. And obviously we talk in coaching around cognitive empathy, of understanding why someone might think and feel that the way they do. And also that demonstration of empathy that by holding the space for someone and playing back what we're hearing, and acknowledging what they're feeling, that we can demonstrate the empathy that we have with them. And I think if we can take that unconditional positive regard, that psychological contact, and the empathy, then we're well on our way to establishing some love in the coaching room. But I think there's one important aspect that needs to be there as well, and that's the welcoming of the whole person into the coaching room. I think if we're just interested in perhaps thinking of their goals and how are you going to achieve your goals, then we don't really make a true connection. And I think we have to come into the coaching room with an open heart, an open hand, and an open mind. And if we can do that and welcome people in, and welcome all of them in, they will have thoughts that maybe are uncomfortable for them. They may be uncomfortable for us, but to welcome whatever their thinking is into the coaching room, and also to welcome their emotions, because there may be difficult emotions, uncomfortable emotions for both the coach and the coachee, then I think, again, we establish love in the coaching room. So if we have the unconditional positive regard, the psychological contact, the empathy, and the welcoming of the whole person into the coaching room, then I think, again, we'll do good work. And this is reminiscent of the concept by the philosopher Martin Buber, who suggests that the I-thou relationship is all important. And according to Buber's concept, there's a communication that goes beyond the structure and the information and just exists as a connection, devoid of any qualification or judgment. So that I-thou relationship sits between two individuals, between the words that are spoken, and just emerges. So I think it's this connection that sits between two people in the coaching room that makes the coaching relationship so special, and makes it a place of love. And research suggests that it's this relationship that is the most important aspect of any helping conversation, including coaching. So it doesn't really matter what approach you take to your coaching. You could be a Gestalt coach, you could be a person-centered coach, you could be a solution-focused coach. But if you can really connect with your coachee, build that relationship, then that's going to stand you in good stead and is the most likely predictor of a successful outcome for the coachee and for the coaching relationship. Now, I'm conscious that time is moving on. I've been waffling on now for getting on for 20 minutes, and we normally try to tailor our podcasts for around 20 minutes. They do tend to drift on a little bit these days, but I'm trying to keep in check. Helen's not here to do that for me, so we will adjourn for the moment. And next time on the podcast, I will be providing you with some reasons why you might want to introduce love into the coaching room. Some of you may be totally mystified as why I'm even mentioning the word love in relation to coaching. So we'll be exploring that in the next episode. In the meantime, if you're enjoying the podcast, do give us a 5-star rating on whatever channel you listen to your podcasts on. Do let other people know about the podcast. Obviously, there's plenty that we now have over 100 back episodes, which are all very useful for someone that's coming into the coaching world. So do recommend our podcast to other people. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And I look forward to talking to you again on my own once more next time. Hopefully after that, Helen will be back to join me, but we will see. And for the moment, I will say bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.